Human consciousness and the concept of the soul. This is a scientific metaphysical synthesis that reformulates the traditional concept of the human soul as a structured, multi-layered system of information processing and field interaction, expressed in language that is compatible with contemporary neuroscience, physics, and information theory. So rather than treating the soul as just a supernatural substance, I model it as an emergent, stratified architecture spanning biological, cognitive, informational, and potentially higher dimensional field layers. Each layer is defined operationally with proposed mechanisms, constraints, and testable implications. My framework is explicitly non-dogmatic and is intended to bridge phenomenology, consciousness studies, and speculative physics without invoking unverifiable metaphysical claims. Across cultures, the concept of the soul has been used to describe continuity of identity, consciousness, moral agency, and transcendence beyond the physical body. And in scientific context, the term is typically avoided due to its religious and metaphysical connotations. However, many of the phenomena historically attributed to the soul, self-awareness, agency, memory integration, altered states, and reports of non-local perception, still remain active areas of scientific inquiry. Here, I propose that the soul may be reinterpreted as a multi-layer system of consciousness-related organization, extending from neural processes to higher-order informational and field-level dynamics. This approach preserves empirical rigor while allowing structured discussion of experiences that exceed narrow neuroreductionist models. The conceptual reframing of the soul would define the soul operationally as a persistent multi-layered organization of information, agency, and experiential integration associated with a conscious system. Under this definition, the soul is not a single entity, but a hierarchy of interacting layers that are each governed by distinct physical or informational principles. Continuity of personal identity arises from coupling across these layers rather than from any single substrate. Layer 1 would be the biological neural substrate. The foundational layer consists of the biological nervous system. The mechanisms would be neural firing patterns, synaptic plasticity, and neurochemical modulation. The functional role would be sensory processing, motor control, and baseline consciousness. This layer is fully compatible with current neuroscience, and it provides the physical infrastructure upon which higher layers operate. Layer 2 is cognitive psychological organization, and this layer corresponds to structured mental activity. Mechanisms are working and long-term memory, symbolic reasoning, and emotional regulation. The functional role is personality, narrative identity, and moral reasoning. This layer is dynamic, context-sensitive, and it's shaped by development and experience. It represents the primary domain of psychology and cognitive science. Layer 3 would be the integrative self-model. So the integrative self-model unifies perception, memory, and intention into a coherent sense of I. Mechanisms would be global workspace dynamics, predictive processing, and metacognition. The functional role would be self-awareness, volitional control, and continuity of identity across time. Disruptions at this level are associated with disassociation, ego dissolution, and certain altered states of consciousness. Layer 4 would be non-local information coupling. So this layer is speculative but operationally defined. The hypothesized mechanisms would be long-range coherence in neural oscillations, quantum-like information correlations without requiring macroscopic quantum states, and field meditated information sensitivity. Its functional role would be intuition, anomalous cognition reports, and collective or transpersonal experiences. This layer does not assert violation of causality, but allows for information access not easily localized in space or time under classical models. Layer 5 would be high-dimensional or field-level identity. This is the highest layer correspondence to the traditional metaphysical notion of the soul. The conceptual basis would be consciousness as a boundary, condition, or field interaction, identity as an attractor state rather than a material object, and persistence as informational coherence. The functional role would be experiences of transcendence, reports of non-embodied awareness, and sense of meaning or purpose beyond individual cognition. This layer is not directly observable, but it may influence lower layers through top-down modulation. The proposed layers interact bidirectionally, so interlayer coupling and dynamics would be bottom-up, which is biological constraints shape cognition and self-models. Top-down, being beliefs, intentions, and meaning modulate neural and psychological states. Mathematically, the system may be modeled as a hierarchy of coupled dynamical systems with partial autonomy at each scale. So in relation to physics and dimensional models, if higher dimensional fields or extended information spaces exist, then a layer V may represent a coupling interface rather than a separate realm under this interpretation. Consciousness is a localized excitation within a broader informational manifold. An individual identity corresponds to a stable pattern of coupling. This aligns with speculative models in quantum gravity and cosmology without depending on any single theory. When it comes to testable implications and constraints, the higher layers are not directly measurable. The model suggests correlation between neural coherence and reported transpersonal states. It suggests predictable effects of meditation, trauma, or psychedelics on interlayer coupling, and it suggests limits imposed by neurological damage on all higher layer expressions. A failure to observe such correlations would constrain or falsify aspects of the model. Recasting the soul as a layered system allows scientific engagement with historically metaphysical concepts, while still preserving methodological discipline. The model neither confirms nor denies spiritual interpretations, but provides a structured framework for interdisciplinary investigation. Proposing that the human soul may be coherently described as a multilayer organization of consciousness, spanning neural, cognitive, informational, and potentially higher dimensional domains. This framework integrates empirical science with phenomenological data and offers a common language for future research into consciousness and identity. Future work might include formal dynamical modeling of interlayer coupling, experimental protocols for studying non-local cognition claims, integration with portal and dimensional interference theories, and ethical implications of extended identity models. This is speculative and interdisciplinary in nature, and it does not claim empirical verifications of higher dimensional aspects. I've written the dimensional layers of the human soul as a legitimate scientific and metaphysical theory that reframes the soul as a multi-layer informational consciousness system, not just a religious object. It uses operational definitions instead of belief language, and it aligns each soul layer with neuroscience, cognitive science, information theory, speculative but constrained physics. It clearly marks where the framework leaves established science and becomes exploratory, and it preserves falsifiability and constraints, which is crucial. It provides the human side architecture needed if portals, higher dimensions, or non-local information access is real, and it avoids conflating consciousness with physics. And now we're going to jump into the physical plausibility of portals between three-dimensional spacetime and higher dimensional manifolds. The physical plausibility of portals connecting three-dimensional spacetime to higher dimensional manifolds has to be examined at a speculative but formally grounded level. Portals are defined as non-trivial spacetime topologies, permitting continuous trajectories or couplings between regions of different dimensionality. So, drawing on general relativity, quantum field theory, and higher dimensional brain-based cosmological models, we can analyze wormholes, brain bulk interactions, and field-mediated interfaces as candidate mechanisms. We can distinguish mathematical admissibility from physical realizability and argue that information level coupling is significantly more plausible than macroscopic matter transport. And we can further compare this framework to contemporary UFO/UAP portal hypothesis, demonstrating that interface-based interpretations resolve several physical inconsistencies inherent in craft-based explanations. No empirical claims are made here. The work is intended as a constrained theoretical synthesis, identifying limits, requirements, and open problems. Higher dimensions and non-trivial space-time topologies arise naturally in several modern theoretical frameworks, including string theory, M-theory, and brain-world cosmology. In popular and speculative context, these ideas are often interpreted as literal gateways or portals between worlds. In physics, however, any such portal must correspond to a precise deformation or extension of space-time geometry governed by field equations and conservation laws. So here we're going to investigate the following questions. Under what conditions, if any, could space-time permit localized structures that connect three-dimensional space-time with higher dimensional manifolds, allowing physical or informational access? The analysis is limited to what is mathematically consistent with known theories and highlights where entirely new physics would be required. I define a portal as a localized region of space-time exhibiting non-trivial topology, such that continuous paths exist between otherwise disjoint regions of spacetime or between manifolds of differing dimensionalities. Formally, this corresponds to a spacetime manifold M, whose topology admits handles, throats, or boundary couplings to a higher dimensional manifold B, such that the induced metric permits causal or acausal traversal. This definition encompasses traversable wormholes, brain bulk couplings, and higher dimensional shortcuts. So a portal is therefore not a hole in space, but a modification of the space-time metric and topology. General relativity admits solutions in which space-time connects distant regions via Einstein. These classical wormholes are non-traversable, dynamically unstable, and short-lived on timescales shorter than signal propagation. As such, they do not permit physical transport. Traversable wormhole solutions, like the Morris-Thorne geometries, require violation of classic energy conditions, sustained negative energy density, and control of tidal forces and horizon formation, while quantum field theory allows limited negative energy effects, which are Casimir configurations. Still no known mechanisms permit the magnitudes or stability required for macroscopic traversal. In brain-world scenarios, observable spacetime is modeled as a low-dimensional brain embedded in a higher-dimensional bulk. Gravity propagates into the bulk, while standard model fields are typically confined to the brain. Within this framework, a portal would correspond to local brain deformation, brain self-intersection, or transient brain bulk coupling. Such a structure would not connect distant spatial locations, but rather allow trajectories that move off-brain into higher dimensional space. There are topology change and energetic constraints, and spacetime topology change presents severe theoretical difficulties, including Planck scale curvature, quantum gravitational instability, and breakdown of classical causality. So most models suggest that controlled topology change would require energy densities that are comparable to black hole formation, rendering small-scale or laboratory-generated portals implausible. Even if a portal could be formed, the stability of ordinary matter in higher dimensions remains unresolved. Force laws, binding energies, and particle interactions may scale differently, potentially preventing atomic or biological stability. This implies that higher dimensional entities, if they exist, may not be composed of matter as defined within 3D physics, and that macroscopic matter transport may be fundamentally prohibited. Electromagnetic field and light couple to space-time geometry through the stress-energy tensor and are fundamental carriers of information. However, EM fields cannot alter space-time topology, and they cannot stabilize wormholes. They may nonetheless function as control or signaling interfaces, mediating information exchange or coupling between dimensional modes without enabling matter transport. A critical distinction arises between information transfer and matter transport. Quantum theory permits non-local correlations and field-level interactions that do not involve the movement of mass. Accordingly, interactions with higher dimensions is more plausibly expressed as information access, field effects, and indirect observational signatures, rather than physical traversal. Reports of unidentified anomalous phenomena frequently describe sudden appearance or disappearance, extreme maneuverability, transmedium motion, and luminous or geometric features. These characteristics are difficult to reconcile with conventional propulsion-based craft, but they are qualitatively consistent with transient space-time or field effects. Craft versus interface interpretations. Craft-based hypotheses require extraordinary propulsion, internal compensation, and material resilience. In contrast, portal or interface interpretations invoke localized space-time coupling, minimizing propulsion demands and avoiding survivability constraints associated with acceleration. Higher dimensional systems may influence lower dimensional spacetime without fully entering it. Observed phenomenon may therefore represent cross-sections, projections, or coupling effects rather than discrete objects. This asymmetry naturally explains inconsistent morphology and the absence of persistent physical artifacts. The absence of recovered materials or stable portals is consistent with models in which any portal-like structure are transient, energetically extreme, and incompatible with matter transport. This comparison does not assert that a UAP phenomenon are portals, but it does demonstrate conceptual compatibility between portal-based interpretations and speculative physics. The asymmetry between projection and traversal is central. Higher dimensional systems may project effects into lower dimensions, while lower dimensional systems lack the degree of freedom required for reverse transversal. This explains why perception or information access may precede physical transport by many orders of difficulty. Portals are mathematically admissible but physically unverified. Wormholes remain the only known portal-like solutions. Higher dimensional portals would likely involve brain bulk interactions. Energy and stability requirements are extreme. Electromagnetic fields may serve as interfaces, not engines. And informational level coupling is far more plausible than matter transport. Physical traversal into higher dimensions would require fundamentally new physics beyond current theoretical frameworks. We would need to explore quantum gravity models permitting controlled topology change, experimental bounds on extra-dimensional field leakage, astrophysical signatures of higher dimensional coupling, and information theoretic approaches to dimensional access. Of course, this is speculative in nature, and it's intended as a theoretical synthesis at the boundary of known physics. What if unidentified anomalous phenomena are portal-mediated transitions? Here I present a speculative but formally constrained framework in which unidentified anomalous phenomenon, or UAP, are interpreted as manifestations of portal-mediated transitions between higher dimensional manifolds and three-dimensional space-time. Unlike comparative analysis that contrasts portals with craft-based hypothesis, this treats portal traversal itself as the primary mechanism and explores the possibility that UAP represent operational realization of physics beyond current theoretical frameworks. I'll examine how localized spacetime topology change, brain-pool coupling, and field-dominated structures could permit transient access to 3D spacetime. And I argue that UAP-like systems, if real, may exemplify the new physics required for stable portal transversal. No empirical claims are made. The work aims to delineate constraints, predictions, and falsifiable implications. Reports of UAP, or UFOs, phenomenon have motivated renewed scientific interest in anomalies that challenge conventional aerospace and physical explanations. Observed characteristics would be sudden appearance and disappearance, extreme accelerations without apparent inertia, transmedium motion, and luminous or geometric field effects. And they are difficult to reconcile with propulsion-based craft models constrained by known physics. So this adapts a different starting assumption that a UAP or UFO are not vehicles traversing spacetime via propulsion, but systems that access 3D time-space throughout transient portals or interfaces enabled by physics not yet incorporated into established theories. Under this hypothesis, a UAP or UFO are not merely unexplained observations. They are potential probes of new physical principles governing space-time topology, dimensionality, and matter-field interactions. Portals as physical mechanisms would be the conceptual framework. A definition of a portal is defined as a localized, non-trivial space-time topology permitting continuous trajectories or coupling between manifolds of differing dimensionalities. In higher dimensional cosmologies, such structures correspond to transient connections between a lower dimension brain, or observable universe, and a higher dimensional bulk. So within this framework, motion through space is replaced by transition between manifolds, apparent kinematic behavior in 3D, such as instantaneous displacement or right-angled turns. This arises from changes in coupling geometry rather than acceleration through space-time. The theoretical foundations would be 1. General relativity and topology change. General relativity admits solutions with non-trivial topology, like wormholes, but traversable configurations require violations of classical energy conditions and stabilization mechanisms absent from known physics. Portal-mediated UAP would therefore necessitate new forms of stress energy or quantum gravitational effects capable of sustaining localized topology change without the catastrophic collapse. And 2, higher dimensions and brain-bulk coupling. In brain cosmology, our universe is embedded within a higher dimensional bulk. A portal may correspond to a localized brain deformation or coupling region, allowing partial emergences of bulk structures into brain-bound spacetime. So such coupling would naturally be transient and localized, consistent with the episodic nature of UAP observation. If traversal through portals imposes extreme constraints on ordinary matter, then UAP or UFO systems may minimize or eliminate conventional baryonic structure. Instead, they may consist primarily of coherent electromagnetic or plasma-like fields, exotic states of matter stabilized by higher dimensional effects, or effective field configurations rather than rigid objects. This would explain the absence of conventional propulsion signature and the prevalence of luminous or geometric appearances. The observed shape of a UFO or UAP may represent a lower dimensional cross-section or projection of a higher dimensional structure, rather than the intrinsic form of an object. Apparent morphing or shape ambiguity follows naturally from this interpretation. Current physics is insufficient for stable portal transversal, because stable portal transversal requires controlled space-time topology change. It requires sustained negative or non-classical energy densities and it requires protection against tidal and quantum decoherence effects. There is no existing theory that provides all three, so if a UAP or UFO utilize portals, they may operate under physical principles not yet unified within quantum field theory or general relativity. Under this framework, a UAP or UFO may represent technological systems developed by non-human intelligence, naturally occurring higher dimensional phenomenon, and hybrid systems combining natural portal formation with controlled stabilization. In all cases, UAP and UFO behavior would reflect the operational limits and affordance of portal physics. If a UFO or UAP embody the physics required for portal access, then they provide indirect constraints on the feasibility of human traversal. Ordinary biological matter may be incompatible with portal environments. Human traversal may require radical transformation or non-baryonic substrates, and near-term access may be limited to information transfer rather than matter transport. Thus, UAP or UFO-like systems may be prerequisites or intermediaries for any future human portal technology. Observational predictions and falsifiability. This framework suggests several testable implications. Correlation between UAP/UFO events and localized spacetime or gravitational anomalies. Unusual electromagnetic or quantum vacuum signatures. Transient violations of classical kinematic constraints without corresponding inertial effects. And absence of conventional propulsion exhaust or momentum exchange. Failure to observe such signatures would constrain or falsify portal-based interpretations. Interpreting UFO or UAP as portal-mediated phenomenon reframes them from anomalous craft to boundary effects between dimensions. This approach shifts emphasis from engineering challenges, propulsion materials, to foundational physics, topology, dimensionality, and field coherence. While highly speculative, it does offer a coherent explanatory structure for otherwise disparate observations. Proposing that UFOs and UAPs may be manifestations of portal-mediated access to 3D spacetime, operating via physics beyond current theoretical frameworks. In this view, UFOs and UAPs are not merely unexplained objects, but potential indicators of new principles that are governing spacetime and dimensional interaction. Confirming or refuting this hypothesis requires advances in quantum gravity, high-energy field detection, and systematic observational programs. Future research work should focus on developing models of controllable spacetime topology change, searching for observational signatures of brain bulk coupling, investigating field-dominated matter configurations, and establishing rigorous experimental protocols for UAP/UFO study. This is intentionally speculative and does not assert empirical verification. It aims to outline a coherent theoretical space for investigating anomalous phenomenon at the limits of current physics. The key things that this does deliberately and correctly is treats UFOs and UAPs as manifestations of new physics, not misidentified crafts. It frames portals as operational mechanisms, not speculative metaphors. It positions UFOs and UAPs as constraints and clues to physics required for portal transversal. It avoids belief claims while still being boldly theoretical, and it explicitly states where current physics fails and why new frameworks are required. It also keeps the tone suitable for theoretical physics, foundations, discourse. Importantly, it does not say that UFOs and UAPs are definitely portals or using portals. It does not claim or say aliens are visiting Earth, and it is not proven. Instead, it says, if UFOs or UAPs are real and accurately observed, then portal physics may already be operating, and our theories are incomplete. That distinction is exactly what makes this a credible theory rather than a fringe theory. And with this theory, I do have an Appendix A, which is the methods and analytical protocols for portal-based UAP and UFO investigations. And this appendix does outline methodological approaches for evaluating UAPs and UFO observations under the portal-mediated transition framework. These methods are intended for theoretical consistency checks, observational correlation, and falsifiability, rather than for confirmation of the hypothesis.